At first, they thought she'd just fallen asleep in the middle of the city. But when the cops got closer, they saw it. Her eyes still open, lips a bluish purple, and her skull shattered by a bullet fired at close range. No one heard a thing. No scream, no security footage, no weapon left behind. Just a body, lying in a narrow alley between two commercial buildings, only a few blocks from Daytona Beach. It was December 2005. The city buzzed with holiday energy. Music poured out of beachfront bars, echoing down streets lit up in neon. But somewhere behind all that light, something had already begun to crack. 2 weeks later, another body turned up, then a third. All women, all shot once in the head, all left behind like no one was supposed to find them. There was no warning from police, no press conference, no one said a word. The local news barely ran a blip. It was as if no one wanted to make noise about it. Maybe because the victims were people society had learned to ignore. Black women, sex workers, homeless. And so the beach town carried on. Tourists still came, still snapped sunset pics, still sipped cocktails by hotel pools. But underneath it all, down the quiet streets at night, someone was out there, walking, choosing, killing, and no one saw him. He wasn't a shadow. He wasn't a stranger. He lived among them, went to college, had a girlfriend, even wrote a paper once on deviant sexual behavior. His name was Robert Hayes, and for nearly 10 years he killed, without anyone ever getting his name right. He didn't hide in the shadows. He didn't wear a hoodie or drift through back alleys like some ghost from a crime show. He wore clean button-down shirts, glasses, polished shoes. He moved through the world like any other man. And that's exactly what made him invisible. That's what let him kill, without anyone noticing. Robert Hayes didn't pick his victims at random. He wasn't driven by lust. He didn't kill out of rage. He didn't need to know their names. He just needed to know one thing. No one was going to look for them. The women Hayes hunted all shared the same profile. Pushed to the margins of society. Black women. Sex workers. No fixed address. No family to report them missing. They were names not written down anywhere. Faces no one remembered. And that invisibility made them perfect. Hayes operated at night, when the lights were off, when Daytona was just waves and headlights rolling past the shoreline. He drove alone through empty streets. He didn't stalk, he didn't chase. He approached calmly, like a familiar face. He knew how to talk, knew how to make people feel at ease. Surviving witnesses said Hayes had quiet eyes, a soft voice, polite manner. He wasn't threatening, wasn't pushy. And that's what made people let their guard down, just long enough to vanish. He'd get them in the car, drive somewhere secluded. No screaming, no struggle. No one ever heard a shot. Because there was only ever one bullet. Straight to the head. No signs of assault. No robbery. No mess. He didn't kill out of passion. He killed like an engineer removing a flaw from his design. Every body shared one chilling detail. Precision. The position was neat, the corpse undisturbed. Each scene felt like a ritual. Cold, clean, still. He had training in psychology, and that didn't just help him understand his victims. It helped him understand the people chasing him. He knew what investigators would look for. He knew how they thought. And he stayed one move ahead, every step of the way. When police pulled the first DNA sample from Ivana Patton's body, they thought they had their break. But it didn't match anyone in the national database. And Hayes, at the time, was a ghost. No record, no priors, no fingerprints in the system. That absence was the perfect disguise. Hayes wasn't some outcast. He had a degree from Bethune-Cookman University. He had a girlfriend, a steady job, lived in a small, tidy apartment. Nothing stood out. And that was the terrifying part. He lived like anyone else. After 3 murders between 2005 and 2006, Hayes suddenly stopped. The police had no leads. The media moved on. Locals forgot about that short, strange killing spree, like it was just a blurry memory. No one knew why he stopped. Maybe he felt satisfied. Maybe it got too risky. Or maybe he was just watching. 10 years passed, and then, in 2016, a woman named Rachel Bay was found dead by the side of a highway. This time, there was no bullet. She'd been strangled. The method was different. But the killer wasn't. DNA from the scene sent shockwaves. A perfect match to the 2006 murders. He was back. And this time, he was trying something new. No gunshot, no noise. Nothing that would tie it back to the old cases. An evolution. Or a new game only he understood. Why 10 years later? Why change the method? No one knows. But one thing is clear. Hayes didn't kill. On impulse, he calculated. And once he made a decision, he didn't hesitate. The fact that he lived an entire decade undetected, walking among crowds, shopping for groceries, attending graduations, smiling in photographs, is what sends chills down your spine. He'd open his car door at night, let a woman step in, and behind her, close out all the light. Hayes didn't need to pretend to be someone else. He already was himself. And his true self was the silence right before someone took their last breath. No one suspected a guy like him, because there was nothing to suspect. Everything about him was average, unremarkable. Just enough to never draw attention. Just enough to kill and leave no trace. He's the most terrifying kind of killer. Not because he's bloodthirsty, but because he knows how to turn murder into a moment no one remembers. And in this world, the deaths no one remembers are the ones most easily ignored. The first death came as quietly as a night breeze. No one saw it. No one heard. Not even a shiver of intuition warned it was coming. Just a body, left behind, as if the world had brushed it aside without reason. Laketa Gunther, 35 years old. A woman, often seen near the central train station. No family, no medical records, no listed address. She was found early on the morning of December 26, 2005. A day when most people were still cleaning up after Christmas. The city still buzzing with the haze of holiday parties. Her body was wedged in a narrow alley between 2 commercial buildings. Her head rested against a brick wall, arms limp at her sides, eyes wide open, expressionless. A single bullet through the skull. Almost no blood. The scene was pristine. No drag marks. No purse. No phone. Nothing to tie her to anyone's memory, except an old ID card tucked into the pocket of her thin jacket. 3 weeks passed. The city quietly moved on. That death sank like silt to the bottom of the water until Julie Green showed up. Or more accurately, her body did, one morning in early January. Lying on its side in a patch of wild grass west of Daytona. No shoes, no scarf. The back of her shirt torn slightly, as if someone had pulled it. One bullet, again to the head. No other injuries, no signs of a fight. This time, police took notice. The crime scenes weren't far apart. The method, identical, almost disturbingly so. Nothing about it felt random, but no one was ready to say the words serial killer. Or maybe they just didn't want to. Didn't want to name what was forming in the dark. Then came Ivana Patton, the third victim, 40 years old. Once a nurse, later consumed by addiction. She'd slipped through the cracks of normal life and landed among the uncounted, the invisible. She was found near an abandoned warehouse off the highway. Shot in the head. Body laid flat, hands folded neatly across her stomach. Like someone had closed a ritual, but there was no ritual here. Just cold repetition. Still one bullet, still no witnesses. This time police found something. Biological evidence left behind. A trace of DNA. It didn't give them a name, but it gave them something more important. A connection. 3 cases, 3 black women, all sex workers, all killed at night, each left in a different location, but all with the same method. A single bullet to the head. Police started drawing diagrams. The public started getting nervous. But the fear was quiet, because no one knew what to call what they were afraid of. The name Daytona Beach Killer began to surface in hushed conversations. No one knew if he was real. There were no confessions, no taunting letters to police. Just 3 bodies, and a question that wouldn't go away. Then, silence. No more bodies. No missing persons matching the pattern. Everything froze in place. If the killer ever existed, he'd vanished, as if he'd never been there at all. Police still had no suspect. The lone DNA sample matched no one in any federal database. Everything hit a dead wall. And as the brutal rhythm of investigation goes, with no new victims, the old cases slipped down the list. The deaths of Laqueta, Julie, and Ivana were pushed further and further toward the bottom of the cold case files. Some detectives were reassigned. The lead investigator transferred out. Tiny leads never followed up. Anonymous tips never returned. A string of deaths faded like sea foam. There one moment, gone the next. And then, exactly 10 years later, the silence cracked open. Not with a gunshot, but with a final breath. Cut off in the middle of the night. 10 years. Long enough for a cold case to be buried and forgotten. Long enough for a killer to live like a model citizen, unnoticed. And then, in March 2016, the silence broke. Not with a gunshot, but with the crushing grip around a young woman's throat. Her name was Rachel Bay, 23 years old. She went missing on a Friday afternoon. Her body was found 3 days later, near a quiet stretch of road in Palm Beach County. She hadn't been shot, no stab wounds, but her neck had been squeezed so tightly, a vertebra snapped. Her shirt torn at the collar, fingernails broken, face purple from lack of air. A slower, more brutal death than the 3 women killed in Daytona a decade earlier. At first, the police didn't see a connection. Different location, different method. But when the DNA sample collected from Rachel's body was uploaded into the National Codis system,
We gotta go north! Everybody's gotta go north! It's the last time we're gonna tell you! So we're gonna
to
have
an
to move you! Let's
unidentified
go!
profile from 2006, pulled from the body of Ivana Patton. Detectives could hardly believe it. A series of murders, thought long closed, was suddenly reconnected by technology. 3 old deaths and a new body, all bound together by one thing: DNA. No witnesses, no IDs, just a strand of code. And the truth it refused to let go of. For the first time in over a decade, investigators sat back down at the table. Old case files were reopened. Crime scene photos reprinted and pinned across the wall like pieces of a puzzle that had never been finished. A special task force was formed. A collaboration between Daytona Beach PD, Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI. They began mapping timelines, pinpointing victim drop sites, reconstructing offender behavior. And one conclusion came into focus. The killer didn't just understand human behavior. He had mastered restraint. He could stop. He could wait. He could watch. And when no one was looking, he returned. The question was, who could live among us, leave no trace for 10 years, and still leave DNA at 4 crime scenes? This time, they didn't let the trail go cold, and they didn't rely on the old tools. They turned to something new, a method reshaping forensic science: genetic genealogy. Unlike CODIS, which only stores DNA from convicted or arrested criminals, genetic genealogy taps into civilian DNA databases, the kind people use to trace family trees or uncover ancestral roots. By reverse engineering the matches, investigators can identify a suspect's relatives, and from there, zero in on the killer. The team contacted civilian DNA testing companies. They didn't find the killer right away, but they found people with high genetic matches, second cousins and beyond. The family tree began to take shape. Names surfaced. Investigators started working through each one, from grandparents to grandchildren. One branch became 2, then 3, until they all led back to a single name. A man who checked every box, male, lived in Florida, resided near Daytona at the time of the original murders, and crucially, had never been arrested. His DNA had never been collected. Robert Tyrone Hayes. Police didn't move in immediately. They watched him. He was 35 now, living in an apartment near Palm Beach State College. He had a girlfriend, a stable job. They followed him to the grocery store, to the gas station, on walks with his dog, chatting with neighbors. No red flags, no odd behavior. He had a degree in psychology. His senior thesis, the relationship between sexual behavior and violence in antisocial individuals. A paper that would later read like a blueprint for his crimes. But police didn't need theories. They needed evidence. So they waited. One evening, Hayes stepped out. He smoked beside his car, then flicked the cigarette to the ground and drove off. A plainclothes officer walked by, picked up the butt, and sent it to the lab. 3 days later, the results came back. A full DNA match to Laketa Gunther, Julie Green, Ivana Patton, and Rachel Bay. Now they knew for sure. On the night of September 15, 2019, just before midnight, the task force knocked on Hayes' door. He answered. He didn't ask why. He didn't protest, didn't lash out. He just stood there and nodded when they read the warrant. In the interrogation room, he said almost nothing. No confession, no denial. When asked if he knew the victims, he said only, "I don't think I need to say anything." A 13-year manhunt ended with a silence of its own. But the DNA, it spoke loud enough. Robert Hayes was arrested in silence, the same way he killed. No struggle, no shouting, no why. He opened the door when police knocked, put on his jacket, walked with them to the patrol car like he'd been expecting it all along. No chase, no gunfire, not a flicker of emotion on his face. At the station, the interrogation began. A closed room, cold white light, a worn metal table, 2 chairs. Hayes sat upright, no handcuffs. He hadn't resisted. Detectives placed photos of the victims in front of him, one by one. They wanted to see something, a reaction. But there was nothing. No flinch, no confusion, no denial. He looked at the photos like a student reviewing case studies in a psychology seminar. "Do you know this woman?" "No." "Have you ever been to this alley?" "Not sure. Maybe." "We found your DNA at all 4 scenes." "Then I guess I was there." That was all he said. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confess. Between him and the investigators was something more chilling than silence. The total absence of guilt. Police suspected he was playing mind games, staying quiet to maintain control. But after hours without a single confession, they realized this wasn't a man trying to hide something. This was a man who didn't believe he had anything to hide. Through the entire interrogation, he never looked anxious, never looked afraid. He spoke in a flat tone, almost polite. No blaming others, no sob stories about a damaged childhood, no tears, no begging, just nothing. While awaiting trial, Hayes stayed the same. Barely spoke to guards, didn't argue with other inmates, didn't try to make friends, didn't posture as dangerous. He ate on time, slept on time, read books, filed no complaints, requested no new attorney. His trial began in early 2022. A courtroom packed with investigators from multiple counties, forensic experts, and over a decade's worth of carefully compiled evidence. Prosecutors laid it all out. Hayes' DNA was at all 4 crime scenes. Semen from Ivana Patton's body. Skin cells scraped from beneath Rachel Bay's fingernails. A strand of hair on Julie Green's shirt. And DNA from the cigarette butt he flicked onto the sidewalk. All a perfect match. They didn't need a confession. The numbers spoke for themselves. Hayes declined to testify. His defense attorney offered no explanation for the DNA, no alibi, no rebuttal. The entire trial unfolded like a mechanical process, cold, smooth, inevitable. In the end, Hayes was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. The court sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. No protests, no outbursts. Hayes bowed his head when the verdict was read, not in remorse, but almost as if he'd finally been released from something that had clung to him for far too long. Outside the courtroom, one victim's relative whispered, "I don't want him dead. I want him alive. So every day, he has to remember what he did." But the thing is, no one's sure he has anything to remember. Robert Tyrone Hayes was born in 1982, raised in Florida in a middle-class family with no glaring warning signs, no reports of abuse, no criminal history, no obvious reason to explain a string of murders spanning more than a decade. He attended Bethune-Cookman University, a small college nestled right in the heart of Daytona Beach, less than 3 miles from the first known crime scene. He majored in psychology. Classmates described Hayes as quiet, reserved, polite, more of an observer than a participant. He wasn't the type to stand out, but he wasn't isolated either. He was just there, in a way that made him easy to overlook. His senior thesis carried a title that only raised eyebrows in hindsight: Sexual Deviance and Violence in Modern Relationships. A nearly 40-page paper analyzing deviant sexual behaviors in contemporary couples, focusing on the male psyche's ties to possessiveness and control. His academic advisor called the work insightful, clinical, a bit cold, but scholarly. No one suspected it was a confession, wrapped in academic language. After graduation, Hayes lived a life indistinguishable from thousands of people around him. He had a girlfriend, held a steady job, maintained social media accounts filled with photos, graduation day, sports, cooking with friends. But under those pictures, the comment sections were empty. Almost no conversations, no real connections. Just like the way he lived, quiet, proper, without leaving a single scratch for the world to notice. But later, detectives would call it something else: the mask of silence. A polished shell built from education, morality, and a darkness no one ever touched. During the years of his crimes, Hayes lived only minutes from the scenes. He knew the streets, knew the patrol patterns, knew which alleys had no cameras. He didn't kill out of chaos. He killed because he knew he wouldn't be caught. Robert Hayes didn't grow up in darkness. He learned how to step into it, deliberately, quietly, without leaving a sound behind. After the 2022 trial, Robert Hayes quietly entered the rest of his life behind bars. No news vans, no special national coverage. His case, brutal, methodical, spanning more than a decade, never truly pierced public awareness the way other serial killer stories did. Maybe because his victims were people society had already learned not to see. Hayes wasn't sentenced to death. Florida allows capital punishment, but the jury chose life in prison. 3 consecutive life terms, no parole, no possibility of release. He was transferred to a high-security facility. His name faded into the background of legal paperwork, becoming just another case file, not a headline. But what he left behind didn't disappear. The Hayes case became a quiet turning point in modern criminal investigation. It marked one of the first times in Florida that genealogy DNA was used to identify a killer, not through a match in the criminal database, but by tracing bloodlines through civilian genetic records. That technology, once criticized as too inexact to hold up in court, is now a standard investigative tool. Cold case units across the country began revisiting forgotten evidence. They pulled out old, degraded DNA samples. They didn't search for names, they followed family trees. And from that, they found killers who had been hiding in plain sight. It wasn't just the signs that shifted. The way people saw the victims began to shift too. The three women murdered in 2005 and 2006, Laketa Gunther, Julie Green, and Ivana Patton, had once been brushed aside as unimportant victims. They lived on the margins, with no family, no one to search for them. But now, they're remembered as the spark that lit a decade-long investigation. The Daytona Beach Police Department admitted it. They missed it. They failed to see the pattern right in front of them. And why? Because the women who were killed weren't the kind of victims society is taught to fight for. In 2023, a small memorial ceremony was held. 3 oak trees were planted in a park near where Laketa once lived. No plaques, no statues. Just 3 rows of trees and a handwritten note tucked under a stone that read, "We remember you, even if we came late." And Robert Hayes? He's never said why he killed. No prison letters, no late-night confession. And maybe there never will be one. Maybe he killed for control. Maybe for academic curiosity. Maybe out of hatred for a certain type of person. Or maybe, as one investigator once said, he killed simply because he knew he could. And a society that lets someone like that kill 4 times and nearly forgot all 4 is a society that has to ask itself, how many other cases are collecting dust simply because no one is looking for the victim? Florida, the land of sunshine, blue waters, and vacations that never seem to end. But behind the white sand beaches, beyond the buzzing night bars, there are streets where the light never quite reaches. Corners of the city where a woman can die, and no one bothers to ask her name. Robert Hayes lived there, right in the heart of Daytona. He went to school, held a job, had a girlfriend. He didn't hide. He didn't run. Because he understood something most killers never do. He didn't need to hide. When society was never looking his way to begin with, he didn't choose victims because they were weak. He chose them because they were invisible. Women whose disappearances sparked no headlines, no press conferences, no framed photos, no weeping family on the evening news. They were what was left behind by the rest of the world. And that made them the perfect prey. Hayes killed like he was testing a theory. No rage, no remorse, no confession. For nearly 15 years, he was just another face in the crowd. And that terrifying normalcy was his perfect disguise. It wasn't until technology caught up, until a single cigarette butt tossed on a sidewalk became irrefutable evidence, that the truth finally began to speak. Not from him, but from his DNA, from the bodies that had stayed quiet for over a decade. Some questions still have no answers. Why those first three? Why the 10-year gap? Why come back? Just to kill once more? Maybe he wanted to stop. Maybe he never did. Maybe he didn't need a reason at all. Or maybe, like the way he lived, he simply did what he knew he could, because he knew no one was watching. In the dark, it doesn't take a monster to cause death. Sometimes, all it takes is enough people turning away. Robert Hayes is the product of a society that decides who deserves to be heard and who can be ignored. A world where not every death is treated like a tragedy, where not every missing person is seen as a victim. And while he now serves out the rest of his life behind bars, the women he murdered still have no statue, no tribute, no closure, just a quiet row of trees in a public park, where their memory slowly fades into the wind. We like to believe justice is light, but sometimes the light comes too late, and when it finally does, all it's good for is showing us what we already lost.